I would call to order the Wednesday, July 14, 2021 meeting of the Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Carmichael,
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here, Commissioner Sharp, Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Commissioner Scales,
Here.
Commissioner Lavoy, and Commissioner Clemens.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Would everyone rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And sir, while I have you standing, I would swear anyone, and Nalini as well, anyone who's going to testify tonight has to be sworn in. Do you swear that you'll tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. And I think we've reminded everyone to silence their electronic devices. And sir, have you signed in? You will need to, either at the podium or out in the hall at some point here for any public testimony. Next item is the approval of minutes for the June 9th, 2021 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Thomas.
Second.
Okay, I have motion and second. Discussion on the item. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Sharp, Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Scales.
Yes.
Commissioner Clemens.
Yes.
And Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes. Okay. Minutes are approved. Next item is we have the opportunity to open forum before our meetings every month. If there's someone present who would like to discuss anything that's not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity. And seeing no one, we'll move on to a review of the public hearing procedures. Sir, I don't know if you're familiar, if you've given public testimony before, but our public hearing is that we introduce you and your petition. You present your petition, and then staff will comment and give questions, and the public as well, and then you can respond to those. And village attorney can give comments and questions anytime to give us help. And then it's the commissioner's turn, and we love to interrogate fiercely, and we'll then at the completion of the commissioner's comments, we'll vote. And just to note that our vote is not the final vote, that we are a recommending body only, that our vote is a recommendation to the village board. At a future date, staff will notify you when you can present before the village board. Questions on that? Okay. First item on new business is PZC 022-2021, a request from Mark Brockton regarding property located at 350 North Grant Street in Westmont for the following. A preliminary plat of subdivision to create 2 lots in the R3 single-family residence district. And B, a final plat of subdivision to create 2 lots in the R3 single-family residence district. The property common address is 350 North Grant Street in Westmont. Sir.
All right, well, it's back up again, wonderful. So my name is Jim Pesavento. I'm with Concord Custom Homes and Renovations. I'm here on behalf of the property owners who are seeking to subdivide the subject property into 2 separate single-family lots. They do meet the zoning requirements. The preliminary engineering and the preliminary tree preservation plan have been prepared and are up on both of the displays here, and I think they've been provided to the board. And both of those were approved preliminarily, respectively, for this session. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions specific to the subdivision that I can.
We have no one from the public here. Staff do you have comments, or?
I do. Is this microphone working? I guess so. All right, so my name is Nalini Johnson, planner for the village, and we have reviewed extensively the proposal that came in. There are a lot of trees. It is a wooded lot, and the zoning is compliant. There is one situation that I'll point out, which if you see the Public Works Forestry Review Comments Letter, number 2, talks about tree number 25 on the preservation plan is to be saved. And the interesting thing is that this tree is outside of the buildable area. There is one tree, I'm not sure if this is the one that we're commenting on, but there is one tree that is north of the lot line, and the root system comes into the lot. And so when you look at the preliminary engineering plan, the footprints are conceptual only, and we don't have actual architectural plans that we are reviewing at all. This is just for the purposes of calculating lot coverage maximums in terms of detention and things like this. So there is a stipulation that any building area or any grading or any digging needs to be at least 15 feet away from either the root system or the trunk. I'm not sure, I'm not the forester, but there are some criteria that we'll be making sure that are followed through as we move forward. Other than that, has been approved, and so the preliminary plat is different from the preliminary engineering plan. So the plan informs the plat, which is what is up for a vote, and then the final plat is actually when all the calculations have been vetted out, all the engineering is done, and it all matches out in terms of the easement line, and so that is what is recordable with the county. So those are the 2 items that you'll be voting on, will be the preliminary plat and the final plat, not the preliminary engineering plan. That's just informational for us to base our decisions in terms of drawing out the plats. So if you have any questions about that, let me know, because we've been struggling with that a little bit.
As long as we have you up, Nalini.
Yeah.
The village forester's comment on tree number 8. Are you familiar with that, where it says, the newest updated tree preservation plan with included comments pertaining to tree number 8?
I think that's the one in the front.
Oh, that's the one we're talking about.
Yeah,
It
that's
says
the one that's on the
number 8.
neighbor's property in the front.
So the comments regarding that tree is that that tree's not on the property.
Correct, and so we need to preserve it. It's on the adjoining property. It is a heritage tree, and any building that goes on this lot needs to take that into account, and we'll make sure that those construction plans, make sense so
Okay.
that that doesn't get destroyed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now it's the public's turn. There's no one here from the public. We'll move on to the commissioners. Commissioner Scales, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any questions. I've reviewed it and everything looks in line, so I'd be supportive of it.
Same here.
Allison? Commissioner Thomas?
You're aware of the tree situation, and anything that you're going to plan, you have to keep that in mind, and you're
Correct.
aware of that, so there's no surprises.
Correct. We're on the same page with the village forester about what's staying and what's going. Most of the trees, unfortunately, that are going are because of the substantial stormwater retention area. Most of the trees are in the back of the property. So, and unfortunately, that stormwater retention system, as you can see, is quite substantial. It takes up over 1/3 of the entire property. It's not feasible to install that in the absence of removing trees. And we've looked at that several different ways. Is there any way we can save the trees and not clear them all out? But in order to install this structure, it has to be that way, unfortunately. So most of the trees are in the back portion of the lot, as you can see. The rest of them in the footprint are going to need to be cleared for the home, but all the other ones, we've identified on the tree preservation plan, and we got a plan to protect.
Good.
That's all I got.
Okay. Commissioner Van Buren?
Yeah, appreciate the time that it's taken you and the effort that you've had to go through since the time that you first, I think it was February when it started.
I appreciate that.
Until
Thank
now,
you.
and so I appreciate the time, and so on you went to get this worked out. Hopefully the cost of lumber hasn't gone up too much in that period of time.
It went up and came down, so it may have worked for the positive in a weird way.
Yeah, okay, well, anyway, I have no problem with it, gotten everything in line.
All right. Yeah, that's, see, 63 trees on the property and 41 of them having to be removed. That would be expensive as well. Again, I've gone over everything, and I see the no conflicts, and wish you luck.
Thank you.
That said, the chair would entertain a motion to approve preliminary plat of subdivision to create 2 lots in the R3 single-family residence
So
district.
moved.
Second.
Clemens?
We have motion and second, Clemens. Discussion on the item? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Scales?
Yes.
Commissioner Clemens?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. And B, a final plat of subdivision to create 2 lots in the R3 single-family residence district. Do I have a motion
Motion?
to
Clemens?
approve?
Second,
Clemens?
Thomas.
Second, Thomas. Discussion of the item? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Clemens?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Scales?
Yes.
And Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. Okay, sir, it passes, so your next test is the village board, and the village staff will notify you when you'll be scheduled to appear.
I appreciate that. Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming, and good luck, sir.
Thank you very much.
And you did get signed in, is that correct?
Yes,
Thank you, just to be sure. Next item, PZC 091, 2021, Planning and Zoning Commission to consider a request from the Village of Westmont regarding the following: proposed zoning ordinance text amendment. And that's zoning ordinance text amendments to the Village of Westmont Code of Ordinances, Appendix A, zoning, including Article 6, Section 6.04, bulk and development standards in residence districts, to remove the minimum land area requirements per building. There are a number of village codes applicable. Is it necessary, sir, to put these into the record at this meeting?
No, it's okay, but you do need to open the public hearing for testimony.
Okay. So, yeah, we didn't close the public hearing from the last.
There wasn't actually a public hearing for the text amendment, or excuse me, for the subdivision. This is actually a public hearing for this specific approval.
I see. All right. Public hearing is open.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nalini Johnson, village planner, and...
Excuse me.
Yes.
We need a motion and a second for the public hearing. You have a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing?
Motion.
Clemens?
Second,
and
Thomas.
second. And,
You can do it. All in favor.
okay, in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Public hearing in effect. Ms. Johnson.
All right, well, good evening. I'm presenting a proposed text amendment to Article 6, residence districts, which basically is going to look at bulk and development standards in the residence districts related to density. Now, we have a proposal in front of you. It was reviewed by the attorney recently, and there are some tweaks that will need to be done. So I want to focus the discussion on just the background portions, and then once we're in agreement with those, we can then instruct the attorney to work on finalizing and wordsmithing and so on ahead of the village board. So he kind of conferred with me earlier, and we decided that that would be the best way to do it, rather than tabling this or just, you know, doing a discussion item, that we could tweak the proposal if you agree with the background planning principles. And after having read the proposed text amendment, of course, you can provide comment as well, okay? So we have a proposed text amendment that has to do with density. Now, density doesn't necessarily have to talk about, doesn't really involve people type density, although it does affect crowding. What we're talking about is bulk and area. So there's a little drawing here that I found that I think was pretty useful, which shows, you know, kind of a crowding scenario from very open area, rural, you know, a small house and a large lot, for example, a lot of space, and it starts to get a little bit denser. Now, that doesn't mean that it's more crowded in terms of the number of people. We're not really talking about that when we look at zoning, although it is related. But you start to see how it goes from, you know, you have the large lot residential, it goes into single family, into duplexes or two family. It goes into compact mixed residential, which is your B1 area, has some residential, has some commercial. Then it goes into compact mixed residential medium, which is a little bit, I wouldn't say that the One North Cass project is that. I think that's more towards the urban, you know, and if you started to have building after building after building of that scale, then you're really talking about more of an urban feel. And Westmont is, you know, what it is. So I don't want to put words in your mouth about what it is. And so this discussion that I'd like to have here is to raise some questions and let you kind of weigh in and see if we're meeting together in terms of what we are thinking. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'd like to generate a little bit of discussion. All right, so the first question I have is, does Westmont wish to match the density in terms of bulk and area, the scale of buildings amassing the bulk in nearby communities, or does it want to be less dense? Now, you can think about the comprehensive plan, you can think about the history of the community, you can think about how it matches up with everything around you. What is the feel of what you think should be happening? Do we want a text amendment that results in more kind of compact development like we have at One North Cass, One West Quincy, which those had a lot of variances, a lot of, you know, modifications to the zoning code. So this proposal could have a situation where somebody could do something like that by right, or as near to by right as could be. So that's the first question. Anyone care to, Wally?
Well, to match what our adjoining communities, we're already way out of balance in terms of our density, single family versus the higher density apartment dwellings. And so it's kind of, that's past. We're past that. It's pretty well set in stone as to where the density is and so on. For the future, I take it that this attempt is to make it more desirable or easier to go to a less dense and to go more to single family or two homes or that type of thing. And so that's, I fully appreciate that, and that's something I would be all for, is to make it more easier. Now, I don't know if our current situation of density or single family versus the apartments has happened as a result of the existing zoning as it is, or it just happened, and whether correcting the zoning or adding a text amendment is going to have any impact on that. That's my.
Okay, I'll weigh in on that a little bit later because I think that's a very important point, or maybe I'll just jump in because I'll forget. So we have a building that was built and another one that is one is under construction, one is going to be constructed. Both of those buildings don't have anything greater than 2 bedroom units. So I think what you're talking about is that family feel would be to generate a situation where by right you could have 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, or office and 3 bedrooms and have the larger units that way without necessarily creating more density. And this is what I'm trying to get at, is that in terms of the bulking and the massing, you know, you might still have a building that looks the way that it looks, but you have those larger units and so on by right, so that it's something that is easier to do in terms of the zoning code. Financially, I don't know, I'm not a developer, but you know, in terms of being able to offer that option to developers to build those larger units or those units that are less transient, that would be a goal that I see for this text amendment.
And currently, our code restricts that from happening.
Yes. Well, restricts is a strong word because that's almost like prohibiting. No, it doesn't. What it does is it says, for one-bedroom units, we need, and it's in the code, it'll say 3,000 square feet per one or no bedrooms. Okay, that's how much a unit needs in terms of land area, not building area. This is another complication why I think it's cumbersome. And I see you're frowning because it is kind of hard to grasp, right? We're talking about square feet of land. So if you have one unit, it should at least have 1 bedroom, it should at least have 3,000 square feet of land. So if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, you can only have 2 one-bedroom units. So your duplex is gonna be very tight. Now, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you might be able to have 2-bedroom units. So that's the type of thing that it's doing. I find it a little, cumbersome in that regard. Then, for example, for 4 or more bedrooms, we need 5,000 square feet per unit. So, it's restricting it that way because we need more land area per unit depending on the number of bedrooms that
Which in
we
the
have.
case of one north, they had to come in for variances to be able to get past that.
Right.
And the
And-
concept here is that you're
Yeah.
making that process more efficient in terms of
Mm-hmm.
review and approvals.
And the funny thing is I was researching this because it was dawning on me. I'm like, we have 2 huge projects and none of them have more than 2 bedrooms. And it could be they have 2 bedrooms and a den, which is not technically a bedroom. So then you're not adding that requirement, right? And I was like, well, this is interesting. So as I was trying to look at other areas and what they're doing, and I looked at Downers Grove, our neighbor, they actually went through the same similar text amendment process back in 2013 when we were putting together the comprehensive plan. So they already got stripped out the bedroom count and so on. So it's kind of interesting how that is a similar thought process. And, if you all agree, that would be one of the things we're trying to do with this is to simplify it in terms of administration and also make it easier for developers to have a choice.
So they were running into the same problem
Right.
that you're identifying now.
And their staff report was about, 80 pages or whatever. I mean, they really went into it as to why. And I don't think we need to go that far in terms of research. I think it's something that intuitively makes sense. Because if we start to encourage the 1-bedroom and the 2-bedroom like we are, and we continue that trend, say with a project on Midwest Road or other projects that come up, then we're basically saying this community is encouraging the type of housing that you outgrow in some measure, or that does not allow for telecommuting as easily, or things like this.
But I have 2 other quick follow-on questions if I can. I guess the first one is, how does it affect other zoning areas? So where you've got a single-family zoning classification, is that, I guess it doesn't really matter in terms of, that's what we just did, right? I mean, we just went through that.
We
created
went through
2
that. Right, because R3 zoning, single-family detached, requires 7,800 square feet for 1 unit, which is plenty. So that's already covered there. We're not proposing to change that. And speaking to your point, Wally, about maybe reducing the density or creating more space around, I think what this does is maintain what we have as far as density in terms of spacing around the buildings, but also creating a situation where you have the choices in terms of the interior configuration of the building, because that is something we are wanting to delegate to the building commissioner's side or to the codes, or, those are already covered. There are minimum bedroom size standards, and in terms of the number of occupants, it'll say, for example, a bedroom needs to be 100 square feet in size, if there are 2 people in it, or I think it's 120 actually, because it's your base 70 for 1 occupant, and then you add 50 for every additional. So the room needs to grow in proportion to the number of occupants. So that's already covered in the building code. We don't really need to have that discussion or that type of regulation in the zoning code, because it's more about how buildings relate to each other rather than what's going on inside the building. That's already there. Those limits are already there.
But it would allow someone to build a 6-bedroom home so long as it was gave a proper square footage per.
Exactly,
Per unit.
exactly.
or
So
per-
you have those self-limiting constraints that don't need to be regulated by the zoning code. They're already adhered to, the architect is gonna look at the building code and say, well, this square footage, this envelope only allows for 3 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms, or 1 office and 2 bedrooms, or whatever.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Should I continue with the discussion? So the second one is, do we want, and this is another purpose of the text amendment, having to do with alternative definitions for things like, instead of, I think we're calling, okay, we have these definitions, or we don't have definitions, we have these terms or terminology. We have single-family detached dwelling unit, actually, I should say dwelling unit, because people are confusing dwelling with building, so that's one thing we want to clean up in the code. Two-family detached dwelling, which, I'm not sure what that is. Is that a coach house? Because we don't allow accessory structures, so that's a contradiction. And we don't have a definition for it either. And then we have single-family attached. So that could be a row house, but then we talk about single-family semi-detached. So those are not zoning terms, those are building code terms. And actually, we had a situation on North Cass, at 413 North Cass, where we had a proposal for 3 units, which seemed to make sense in terms of square footage, but it turns out that because of the way it was built and the way it shared the party walls or didn't, and things like this, which was getting into the weeds in terms of construction, it would not allow for 3 units, but only 2. So they had to come back and redraw their plans, because we don't have that distinction.
So
We just have
Westmont doesn't
number of
allow for a
units.
coach house or a separate, where are you supposed to put the in-laws?
The basement.
The attic, I don't know.
Had it with the crazy aunt.
Yeah, so this is, yeah, go
So
ahead.
some of this is just changing terms to more correct descriptions of what a,
Right, so something more colloquial in a way as well, because really, we don't know what semi-detached means. I mean, we could guess, but we don't want to do that. And we also don't want to be looking at definitions all the time for things that are simple. Why not just call it a duplex or a 2-flat? You can visualize what those are. A duplex side by side and a 2-flat is vertical, right? So that's the idea, is to kind of tweak the code that way.
is any of this rubbing, so we have zoning codes and building codes, and it
Well,
seems as if they're rubbing up against each other, if not overlapping on.
a little bit, and they should work together. And when a plan comes through, the architect should be looking at both, and that's their job. They need to reconcile the two. So if we have something that talks about semi-detached being allowed here, but the code says semi-detached, the building code talks about semi-attached is something else, that's where
Yeah, that's what it would have to be.
so we need to keep them separate. They can talk about semi-detached, but we can talk about number of units. Then that makes it simple. In other words, we can say, you can have up to 3 units based on the zoning, but you still have to talk to the building commissioner. So then it goes there, and then he reviews it and says, oh, you can only have 2 because of these other restrictions, but they're not, built in so that, we're confusing things. Or we say you can only have 2, but it turns out they could have 3. Anyway, it's complicated. So we want to simplify it, right?
Right.
Okay. So that is the second purpose, is to modify the terminology to simplify it and maybe not need those definitions. I mean, if we have duplex without a definition, we all know what that means. Is everyone in agreement with that purpose?
So,
Okay. Very good. So number 3, do we want to remove consideration of the number of bedrooms when discussing bulk and massing? I already kind of touched on that, and I think we're all saying yes. And then the question is, dwelling unit count per land area, or per lot, or per acre? If we start talking about acres, but we have 5 lots that are within that acreage, then our count gets skewed. So what we're proposing is simply units per square foot lot. Like a lot is a certain size, how many units can you fit in that lot based on a calculation, and you zone down, not zone down, you count down or round down so that you don't have partial units. And that would be it.
Makes sense.
Okay. Great. And then the fourth question is similar. We're going to try to remove the word buildings as much as possible because our zoning code does not allow for more than one building per lot unless it's a planned development, in which case the rules kind of go out the window anyway. You can do whatever fits in with whatever plan is going on. So, although that's not as simple as that either. But, so the idea would be to remove the consideration of the number of buildings per lot area, because I think that's part of the code. It takes up about a section that talks about number of apartments per lot area, and we don't allow more than one apartment building per lot. I think that's simple, right? We all agree with that one? Okay, and that's it. So then I move into definitions. We're going to modify, as we've been talking, the definitions tables and the definitions section as a comprehensive amendment sometime in the future. And so rather than piecemealing these, we're going to just, put them all in there. So right now we don't have a definition for density, but we plan to. For example, it's not, number of people per square foot or whatever. It's what we are talking about. Units or households, not even households, units, although households are related. So here's a proposed, as very small print, here's a proposed definition for lot area per unit. And full disclosure, and I feel uncomfortable doing this because I'm a journalist background and I don't like to plagiarize, but basically, apparently, it's public domain. So I just have to throw that out there for my own good feelings. This lot area per unit definition is a lot area per unit definition that is used in Downers Grove. Now, we can come up with our own, but at least we have an idea for what a community around us is doing. Okay? So the definition they use is lot area, measured as a total ground level surface area contained within the lot lines of a lot. Now, in Westmont, a lot can be a parcel or a subdivided or platted lot. So that's another element that maybe is not in other communities as much. There are a lot of lots that were created by parcelization rather than subdivision here in Westmont, which is a little bit of a complication when it comes to stormwater. Okay, and then lot area per unit is a measure of residential density. So I'm not sure I agree with that because, again, it speaks to people a little bit, people that live somewhere. But for me, it has to do with a box on a lot. How do you relate the massing? Now, you do have FAR that also covers that. And is that a redundancy? It could be, but we're not going there right now. So you can read through this. Oh, I don't think you have a copy, but we're not even going to vote on this today anyway. But just so you know that we are going to come up with these definitions, and we're probably going to make them more tailored to Westmont, and then we'll present that as we go
I was
on.
going to say, I don't believe these suggested definitions of lot area or lot area per unit are in our paperwork, in our packet. So that's not something that we're
Yeah.
considering or voting
No,
on tonight.
we're
Okay,
not.
good, thank you.
Yes, it's a discussion item, so that we're thinking about it, and we might need a definition. But the fewer definitions we need, the better, because that means that the language is clear and it's colloquial and it's easy to understand. Okay, so the purpose of this text amendment that we're working on and that you are being asked to vote on today, that is only related to section 6.04, bulk and development standards in residence districts, which will be tweaked by the attorney through a process that we go through before the village board meeting. The goals of the text amendment are simplifying the bulk and development standards, simplifying them. So they're a little shorter, a little easier to administer, a little easier to calculate. We don't have to know exactly how many bedrooms. Maybe they don't know. Maybe a developer comes in and says, I want to build this type of building. They're not sure. We don't want to go into that necessarily right then and there. But the number of household units might be important because it has to do with parking, it has to do with, different things that you kind of do want to know. Another point is allowing a higher number of bedrooms per unit without placing restrictions other than those placed by the International Building Code, so it's a recap of what we've talked about. Allow a wider range of housing types without removing restrictions for what is allowed by code today. Okay, so we don't want to say, well, now we're going to build all these huge houses or 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, or lots of office space, but you're not allowed to build a 1 unit in the studio apartments. No, that's not the aim. The aim is, this is why we took the smallest number, and we're saying, regardless of, your minimum is this, and then depending on the building code, you can add bedrooms. That's up to you to figure out. And it enables greater density as a proposed land area requirements per unit begin at okay, so I already talked about that just now. Simplify the review process by focusing on a density calculation that's simple. And it just goes on into stuff I've already said in small print. And so the timeline is that we will hopefully vote on this item today, the concept of it. You have the text amendment that we propose in front of you. There are some comments from the attorney, which I can share with you. And then we can, have the final draft done before the village actually votes on the actual language. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, well, rather than just calling on individual commissioners, let's just have a group discussion here. This is indeed complicated. I wouldn't mind getting a copy of those proposed.
The presentation I shared?
Yes.
I'll share it with
And,
you. Okay.
So I think I understand in general, that in any vote tonight is on the concept, not the,
It's on the concept, and you did receive the proposed text amendment, and
Yes.
if you find that it's adequate enough, you can vote on it as is, and we will continue to make improvements. There are certain things, for example, I struck out feet from the boxes
yeah.
because I meant to put square feet in brackets next to the unit type, and so those are some of the comments that I received. But those are basic tweaks.
One quick question on the requested actions, just the comments on the proposed text amendments further the purpose of their respective sections of the Westmont Village zoning code by correcting mistakes or making improvements to the code as determined by the zoning administrator.
Oh.
I assume that is you.
I believe that is actually Bruce.
So the
The
economic development
the
director is.
community
is
development
where's
director
that
is in
hat
charge of all of that.
zoning administrator.
But he delegates powers or whatever,
Sure.
so, yeah.
Okay, I wasn't familiar with the term, but.
Yeah, those are the types of amendments that the code needs all throughout. A lot of times it'll say the village shall, and it's like, well, who, and it doesn't help administer some of the pieces.
Okay.
Thought it made sense just in what she had to say back and some of the Q&A that we had. And thinking back to like 1 Main, I'm sorry, 1 North, just probably some of the things we could have shaved off of that in terms of approvals with something like this in place. Would you agree that made sense, or anybody else agree or disagree?
Well, indeed, attorneys may not agree, but I like to simplify, but, with any question, that someone else is bring up a point, well, what about this lot, this building? Well, can I do this? Can I do that? And, if you oversimplify it, how about an attorney comment here with,
Yes, I guess there's always a concern if something's oversimplified, but I don't think that's the concept that she's trying to propose here today. I think it's more of clarification.
Clarification as
And by that clarification, some of the redundancies and some of the other things may be removed from the ordinances and the codes at that point. But again, I don't think it's simply trying to just make it as simple as possible. I think it's just trying to bring it in line with more current terminologies and planning techniques and things that are out in the everyday world.
Thank you. Have you spoken with anyone or reviewed any other area communities besides Downers Grove?
No, I chose Downers Grove specifically because they're growing by leaps and bounds, and there are a lot of issues with that growth. Like shared spaces are a problem, alleys are being sold off, just issues like that. So, it's nice to grow, but you want to avoid the growing pains. So hopefully we can learn, and so I thought it was appropriate to say, okay, we want to grow, maybe not, to what degree, and in what way. And I thought that was a good choice. I think the other communities are a little less active, and like you were talking about, they're set in stone in a way. I don't think Westmont is necessarily set in stone in that way. I think there's a lot of developer pressure that is not being able to be accommodated because of certain regulations that don't allow that growth. So hopefully we can help with that.
Wally, I wanted to get your opinion. You alluded to the, I think the comprehensive plan goal of more than 50% of housing units in the village being privately owned, and the concern with the central business district apartment buildings, maybe throwing that out.
Well,
With regard to what the village, we want more density, or
I think,
these are
okay.
within the central business district is one thing. How about the rest of the village?
Well, the central business district is where I bent my personal feelings about density, or about the apartments versus home ownership, because basically to revive the downtown. But I would be opposed, as we were on 63rd when they tried to go multiple, and we also opposed the massive apartment building that they were going to put in on the golf course property up here. And I think that what we're trying to do while we're trying to simplify or make things align in our terminology and so on, we're also, I think I read in here that we're really trying to encourage less transiency by giving more bedrooms to, if you put in all one-bedroom units, I assure you, you're gonna have the most transient development going. Even twos are gonna be moved away from, with families that are growing. So I think I get the underlying, from what you're doing here, I get that underlying feeling, and I'm all for that.
Craig?
I agree. I agree. We want them to stay, as the family grows, stay in the building, or have room to stay in the building, and not have to look immediately, and it's more family oriented and solid. I agree.
Yeah, have a
Yeah, I would say
comment,
the
Allison?
same thing, because I know we even voted on a particular house, and, south or north, I don't know my directions, north, and they need more space, and if they didn't have more space, then they would have to move out, most likely out of town. So I think I'm in agreement with that. We need to encourage more of that,
And that's, this seems to
clarify.
gather our thoughts in that direction.
Are there any
So-
adverse reactions to it that anyone's thought about, or that I'm not thinking of, or anyone else isn't thinking of?
The only comment I got that was a formal comment was from the building commissioner, and he talked about making sure we knew all of the different definitions and things in the code, and I think that's a valid point. I think the zoning code in the past, and this particular item was a text amendment some years ago. And the way they arrived at the numbers for the bedroom counts was through the building code. And they came up with, well, you know, a 3-bedroom unit needs a certain amount of square footage, and they did it in that backward way, so they created the code, the zoning code, by looking at the building code, which makes sense in a way, but it's hard to administer, and again, you're making a distinction between the number of bedrooms. Now, what we could do is say, instead of taking the smallest number of land area per unit, for the single, you know, for the 1 unit or 1-bedroom house, why not take the 4 and above, which provides for more land area requirements, and apply that to the studio and the 1-bedroom? And that way you're creating still more of a spacing between units or between buildings, right? While still providing that mix and allowing people to have huge studio apartments, let's say, versus a tiny studio apartment. So that's another thing to consider if you want to think that one through. But, you know, the numbers are something that we're going to look again and again. And if you tell me we would like to provide for, you know, larger units of any number of bedrooms with wide spacing between buildings, then we'll look at the numbers and try to match it up with that idea. Or if you want to say, we like the compact units, regardless of the number of bedrooms, and you can take the smallest number and apply it to the larger number of bedrooms, and whatever the requirement is, apply it to all. Whatever it is that you want to do, we can do. Or if that's too complicated, we can keep it simple and just strike out the lines and have number of bedroom counts, which is mostly what I did. And then I looked at Downers Grove and try to make sure that whatever we're doing is not creating more density as compared to Downers Grove. So it's actually going to be either the same or less dense by keeping our own density numbers.
And creating freedom for a developer to come in and put
Right.
4 bedrooms in if they want to.
Or maybe they don't want a floor. I mean, maybe they want a huge atrium.
Right.
Things like this.
Okay, well,
I think I'm ready to vote.
well, I don't think we have any more discussion here. Chair would entertain a motion to approve zoning and ordinance text amendments to the Code of Ordinances, Appendix A zoning, Article 6, Section 604, bulk and development standards in residence districts, to remove the minimum land area requirements per building.
There's also-
So moved.
there's a-
Scales.
There's some more, there's just one sentence on the back. so
And, thank you,
It's no problem.
minimum land. Okay, that was a semicolon. To remove the minimum land area requirements per building, the minimum land area requirements per dwelling, per number of bedrooms per dwelling type, and replace these with minimum lot area requirements per dwelling unit. And
So moved. Scales.
I have a motion.
Second.
Scales.
Second, Clem?
Second, Clements. Further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Scales?
Yes.
Commissioner Clemens?
Yes,
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. And Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
And Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. And there you have it, Nalini. Good luck with this. It's, like you say, it's a,
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification.
But of course.
I knew we voted, but we should probably also close the public hearing.
all right? No, I can do that
Yes.
myself. You know. Public hearing is closed. Thank you. Next agenda item is miscellaneous. Does anyone have any comments?
I have a question. There wasn't a sign out in front of the 350 grant. Is there a new policy on putting signs out when there's
Good
a?
point.
350 North Grant was a plat, and I believe that plats of subdivision do not require
Oh,
public
okay.
hearings. So only if they also are accompanied by a rezone or anything like that, or a
Okay.
variance.
Okay.
Because I drove right by.
Did you?
I did a couple of times, and I kept looking for a sign. I thought,
We've been spoiled.
Good question.
okay, no,
Didn't we do something on that lot just to the south of there with the house and garage way back some years ago?
if I should know if we did, and I don't remember.
Well, Okay, and if no one has anything, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.